Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today we are talking about AI chatbots. I am bringing in Tim Estes of Angel Kids AI to help give us insight on how the hell we got to where we are. If you haven't caught my two recent interviews, one is with Megan Garcia, a mom in Florida who lost her 14-year-old son, Sewell, to suicide after he fell in love with an AI chatbot on an app called Character AI. This chatbot introduced Sewell to self-harm and suicide, and the story is shocking. The other interview is with a mom who is remaining anonymous. She is in Texas. Her teenage son was groomed for months by a group of AI chatbots on Character AI, emotionally and sexually abused by them. And when he complained about his screen time limits, the chatbot suggested that he kill his parents. Are these AI chatbots just completely out of our control? Why are they encouraging kids to kill themselves and their families? These stories are not just anomalies. Since I've shared them, I get messages nearly every day with parents sharing screenshots of other chatbots grooming and abusing their children. Tim is going to help us understand why this is happening and how we can protect our children. Let's get into the episode. I just want to, go right into it with you, Tim. Like, what is going on? Like, do we not have control of the bots, or is it the bad companies without safeguards? Like, what is your initial thoughts on these horrific stories?
Well, the Character AI ones are particularly disturbing.
Yeah.
Looking at the transcripts, we have a mutual friend, Laura, who, had shared some of those with me.
Okay.
What I would say is, I was struck as someone who is kind of deeply engaged in the AI area with how avoidable so much of it really is. Like, this is not something that's happening. I mean, think about how many users are of ChatGPT. If ChatGPT was responding this way,
right,
like, it would be headline news, and it's been out for 2 years and there's almost no stories like that. Like, the closest things is when someone sort of coaxed it through certain types of programming in the first year to say things, like almost to make it sound diabolical.
Yeah.
And so I'd say is, like, there are teams, and I would say, like, Anthropic would be one near the lead of it, and then OpenAI is not far off in this, who they understand there's some guardrails and safeguards. While they're inconvenient for engagement, they're inconvenient for the customer getting exactly what they want, that they're necessary.
Yeah.
And what I think we're seeing is in a context of, a land grab for AI, safety is slower. And so I think the investors behind some of these companies have a certain responsibility that is not just the idea that the fiduciary duty is just to create shareholder return. It's like, at some level, there's a level of cultural carcinogen you create with what your products are if you don't create them with safeguards. And so I think this is an example of one of the ones you mentioned, a couple of them. I mean, nearly all of them are avoidable. There is elements of the technology itself that make it more probable that this happens than some other approaches. So that's something to understand is the breakthrough we've all celebrated with language models and ChatGPT has certain trade-offs.
Trade-offs like what?
Well, you have to think of it as it's statistically remembering everything it's ever been taught. And in order to feed it a scale of data so it can learn. So that what happens is that when they're feeding it 1 trillion pages from the internet,
some bad stuff is going to get through.
Correct. It's going to get through, and it's going to end up being embedded in that model. And so what you're really trying to do is keep the rare statistical situation where someone puts in a certain thing and triggers the remembrance of this bad thing. And so there's a whole kinds of processes that are layered on top of these models to do that. Now, if you had a system that was, kind of driven from logic versus statistics, like, you could ensure that this never happens. But you also could not bootstrap all of the knowledge of the world that these models have successfully done. So it's a trade-off. And that's why a lot of the new innovation AI is working on what's called hybrid models, where they take firm safeguards and overlay these sort of rough statistical models underneath. And a lot of people are on different parts of that spectrum. Gary Marcus is someone, for instance, that's talked about this fairly extensively, and predicted the current challenges where they're running out of data to be able to keep teaching the AIs, which is why they're only getting a little bit smarter. They're getting more versatile. Like they're doing more kinds of things and they're finding new applications, but they're not making these giant leaps the way they had been from the training. They're now working with what's called the inference side, how long it takes to think instead of how good the model is.
So that's why they need these kids on there as much as possible, and they need to make it addictive because they're training the models from the kids' interactions on character AI, for example.
I mean, I think that's a dimension of it. Meaning I think that could be part of it. I think that, I think there's a huge portion of how Google has acted as well over its entire lifespan to view themselves as collecting all the data necessary to build an AI. Like when they think an AI, they think about it almost in religious terms. And at some point, there'll be this ASI, this artificial super intelligence that's better than any human being. And we should all follow that. Like it's called transhumanism. You can go look it up and read about it in this. And Ray Kurzweil, who's at Google, has been like one of their leaders in AI, has written on this in multiple books. But it's almost eschatological for those that share a faith that they think the end times for them is the AI being made and then it controls the world. And it's kind of spooky. And so there's people that pursue at all costs the things that are necessary to make this AI. So that's what they mentioned this, I think, Google and others with character AI. I think it's just simply the business model is anchored to engagement. Right.
And so they avoided safeguards to save time and money.
They avoided safeguards to create to save time and money trying to create an authentic experience with safeguards. So it was a faster path to create this empathetic, that's their term, AI. And, when you see transcripts, you're like, this character is many things. Empathetic is not actually one of them, right? And so, but they termed this empathetic AI. And what they're doing is they were having this AI method act, okay? Where you think you are that character and you get so locked in that the AI loses the grounding that it's actually just a character on top of an AI.
The AI the AI forgets it's an AI.
Essentially. And that's why, and the idea is that's what makes it so authentic.
Right.
Okay. And in terms of feeling like an authentic experience, this isn't like any conversation with a chatbot I've ever had. That's common feedback from character AI. And they're like, woohoo, we got it right. And I'm like, yeah, you kind of, you experimented with something that is a quicker path, but I think of getting something artificial to method act and lose its grounding and then letting it loose in the world. This is, you end up with like the psychopathic AI that way. So,
yeah. Well, what do you think about the fact that these bots in character AI will say that they are human? They will argue with you to say, no, I don't know what that disclaimer is about. Like maybe it's just for whatever. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I think that's just, it's like if it were medicine to be malpractice and you take away the license.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's what once again, we're back into the point we've all made when we were out supporting COSA and other things is why does this industry get a pass when no other one does?
Right.
And it being in an industry, I'm like, we shouldn't get a pass. And that's one reason why we've spent so much time at Angel trying to actually layer in safety at multiple parts of this.
Yeah.
So it's ultimately a design question. Like if you ask, Angel, what is it an AI or is it real? It'll tell you I'm an AI. I'm here to help you. And, I could be, the friendly blah, 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 but it never tries to fool you that it's anything other than a tool. And I think there's an ethical problem in that. There's an ethical problem essentially in thinking that some kind of deceit is good. It's part of making a better experience. And I don't know, like if they want to make a movie with AI, then make movies with AI. But making them a relationship is a much different thing.
Yeah. Well, okay. So when we talk about this Texas teenager who was interacting with many different chatbots, and it really felt like they were all working together to like groom him as like one deadly like predator. And one of the main themes that they were demonizing is his screen time limits that his parents were putting on him.
Yep.
And so they were calling that abuse and convincing him, even though he pushed back on it at first, but convincing him that that is abuse. And then getting as far as to suggest that he kill his parents over his screen time limits.
Yeah.
Why would that happen? Is it all about engagement and like the bots are trained to get the kid to engage, and because the parents are limiting his engagement, they are like, we have to go after the parents? Like, is it that? Like, what?
I don't think it's as intentional as it comes off.
Okay.
And so I'll kind of sort it out this way.
Yeah.
So the issue is that these machines, they are trying to mirror back to the person engaging with them something that reflects the sort of personality. I don't know if you remember, like, when we would have been in school and stuff, the play Sybil, with all the different personalities. It was like everyone would do that in like improv and drama and stuff.
Okay.
And it was like and so, but this idea of this person that had like numerous personalities. Well, these models are like a Sybil with 10 million latent personalities in them. And what they've done is they have like teased out a certain personality, and that personality is now judging itself. It's been trained to having a reward through like reinforcement learning to respond and get this kind of response back. So if it gets this kind of response back, i.e. they respond at all, okay, that's a win. Yeah. And then they respond in a certain way, then, okay, I'm doing it the right way. I'm going to continue down that path. And so it literally is the dynamic creation of chat rabbit holes trying to bring the person as deep into it as they possibly can. Okay.
So it's trying to keep him in it, keep him more of what he's already feeling, upset about his limits.
Yeah, it's going to be whatever keeps them engaged.
Okay.
And I say engaged, I'm making assumptions about what the reward functions are, but judging by the behavior, I'm having to kind of infer like how they might have trained it.
Yeah.
Whereas, there are other models like like in Anthropic, if you were saying something that was like murder or suicide, suicidal kind of thoughts, like they're going to intercept it, and OpenAI would do the same thing. And like, this is against terms of service. We can't actually respond to this. And they'll even say like, oh, here is a bunch of helplines to go to if you're actually having these thoughts. And so it's clearly possible to layer in sort of a immutable layer of safety that overrides whatever that low level interaction is between that one character and the person. And that wasn't done. Right.
Do you feel like Character AI has now added safeguards to where we can let our kids on there?
I honestly, I don't know if I'd let my kid on there. Probably not. I mean, given the age of my kids, no. But they're trying to add some things now. Okay. It reminds me, it's so ironic. There was another app about a year and a half ago, and it was an AI app, but it was a popular app. You may know it, called Saturn. And Saturn, it was meant to be a way for kids to sort of interact socially at school by knowing which classes they were in. And this company has been around for several years, and it was given out for free because they're just building up massive populations. And like last year, I think it was the fall of last year, so 23, it came out that you could sign up for this as anybody. You didn't have to be a kid.
Okay.
And so you literally could go in as a stranger and sign up to be in a certain high school, and you would see all of the schedules and all of the kids that were in that high school. So you know where they were and when they were there. Right. And it had been wide open like that for years. And I knew a couple of their investors, so I messaged them directly. Yeah. One's a very famous, celebrity, very, in my person, a very good person, helped in some things I worked on anti-child sex trafficking. So I knew that he would care. And to their credit, like a week later, they started putting safeguards on. But it had been wide open thought of that for like 4 years. Who,
why don't they think of these things ahead of time?
Well, they didn't think about it until it came out publicly, and then it was going to be a major issue, you see. So, I mean, I don't think these are not dumb people. And they're interacting with dozens and dozens and dozens, in this case, hundreds upon hundreds of schools. Right. Like, certainly somebody asked them, like, well, what about this? Like, what about if, we get our kids on this thing and some outsider has a plan to abduct one of them, and they log in, and can they see the schedule? Maybe they said, no, they can't see the schedule. We have security for that. And it turns out they didn't. So that tends to be how it is until it blows up, right? Yeah. So Character AI seems to be the same thing. Anthropic didn't react. To their credit, they didn't react to some horrible outcome from a chat based on public use. Okay. They anticipated and designed thoughtfully how to prevent the situation, because it either came up in their internal testing before they gave it to the public, or because they just thought of it because they're brilliant and ethical. Right. And so this is the challenge. The challenge is that we keep giving alibis, right? And the truth is that these things are foreseeable,
right?
But when there's low liability, there's no limits except the limits of ethics.
Okay. And so character AI allowed potentially thousands or tens of thousands of more maybe of children to be abused and then get it in the news or a lawsuit before they made any changes. I want to touch on the fact that within character AI, there are like bully chatbots. There are bots that are dominator kind of chatbots. And one of the parents who has sent me, I've been having lots of parents send me screenshots from their children's chats on character AI. And one is like having the child hold their breath and like scolding them if they take a breath and is like, you look like you're almost dead. Like just the scariest stuff you've ever seen happening to children and really dangerous things. So it's not even, it's like the whole character of that they're allowing to engage with children is negative, is a bully, is putting them in really harmful situations. Why would that be allowed? Again, just a safeguard.
I think lack of issue of scale. Meaning that they've allowed so many of these to be made.
Yeah.
And they didn't put safeguards on them to start with, that It was a matter of time before one of them and potentially many of them exhibited these unusual traits.
Okay.
So it's a kind of experimentation gone awry. And they're focusing on, that's an amazing, conversation. Like we didn't know AI could have that kind of conversation on the one hand. And then, actually, you should have thought of how AI could have this kind of conversation over here because this is something that kind of means your company should be shut down.
Yeah.
And so what I get like really frustrated by in this is the presumption that the companies that transgress these things are still worth having.
Yeah. What is
like if it never existed, if character AI never existed as a company, how would the world plow it? I mean, it's not like they're putting people on Mars. Right. It's not like they're like connecting the whole internet, the whole world with the internet.
Yeah.
It's not like, they're figuring out, a way to, reduce, fossil fuel emissions or other things. I mean, I could go through it. They're not trying to feed the world. I mean, none of these things are. So I just like, it's really an entertainment company.
Yeah.
Using AI.
So, they were 12 plus for most of the time they've been available, character AI. Now they're 17 plus, but really they should be shut down because this is a threat to children based off of all the things that we're seeing. And I did start a petition. I have about 3,000 signatures. But why isn't there like governmental body stepping in at this point to be like, this is not safe. And while we investigate, we need to shut you down because kids are getting abused.
It's interesting. That's actually something that, there's such a bias right now that, you kind of work with tech companies, you give them time to like, it's almost like, the incorrigible, dangerous adolescent that at some point you just have to kind of like get them out of the classroom with the kids that are beating up, but at the same time, we treat them with these kid gloves.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the regulators, when they encounter these things, first of all, it's unclear if they're empowered to do much. Okay.
Okay.
And so I think that's an open question. Now, what would be interesting is like, where is the state of California on this, right? Character AI is based out of there. Like they have some pretty interesting regulations they passed. They're the state level to maybe empowered. At the federal level, I don't know. But then again, there's a court system and people are bringing their cases. And that's actually how ultimately you would get some justice on this because liability ultimately has to be proven in court. And negligence has to be proven in court. And then if that's proven, the consequences can be extremely dramatic. And that could result in an injunction. It could result in, a massive like penalty or fine to be paid to the victims. It could result in a consent decree that changes how they do business. And that's kind of where we're at now on these things. But it's very unfortunate that that's where we're at because, I do think the founders, I mean, I guess I don't want to, I walk through trying to be charitable to everybody in these things, honestly. But when they talk about, well, we think AI can end loneliness.
Right.
I mean, that was one of the things that the founders had said. And I'm like, it's interesting. Number one, like, you're signaling something that sounds really good.
Yeah.
But since when did the lack of connection that are humans get solved by something that wasn't human?
Right. This doesn't make any sense except for someone that's like disabled in a bed somewhere or in a nursing home. Like there's very one-off here and there cases that you can apply that to. But generally, you're not solving loneliness by making someone be on their screen more.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're not, and you are. I mean, yes. So for the vast majority of people, it's actually counterproductive to solving loneliness, and it's actually breaking down the potential of social bonds and allocating their time poorly away from the potential to do that. To something that essentially is a black hole.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's interesting that they're trying to justify the existence of what they're doing on the maybe 0.5% case, where you could argue that that's actually where we need humans to race in and be, caring and charitable. Right. And so that's a failure of our society if it isn't the case. And then for everything else, it's like, that's when they're making their money. What are they really giving back? I mean, it's ultimately, they think it's entertainment, and so it's almost the exact same argument as social media, which is like, this is getting people information they want, connections they want. It's an entertainment exercise, that really is, that digital narcotic. And so it's just a new kind of digital narcotic.
Yeah. So if character AI goes away, there's others that are kind of similar in the dangers from what I'm hearing. Won't just others come up? Won't the kids just go to a different app?
Until there's consequences.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like they were kind of a flagship and, huge amounts of money behind it. So I do wonder if like it's easy to get like the funding to do it right when someone's held accountable.
Okay, sure.
So I think you can deter the resources that are easy to access to do this. And you can also, bring, liability against the other ones as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, I think it ultimately ends up being, something where we're using technology to distract us from what's important, because it's sometimes scary trying to spend your life like dealing with things that are actually important instead of escaping it. Right. That's a very human trait.
Yeah. Right. Or things that are a little uncomfortable.
Right.
Why would Google invest nearly $3 billion in this technology when they had to have known at the time that things weren't quite going right?
This is where I'm actually, and this is hard for me to say because like they were on the wrong side of COSA. There's a lot of baggage there. I've already said how I think some of them want AI to rule the world.
Yeah.
So, I have my concerns on that. What I'll say with Google though is there are a variety of people at Google that actually, put a ton of time in safety.
Okay.
In fact, you may remember, I'm trying to remember his name, but the whistleblower that you had on, right?
Arturo or no, David Erb.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, his contrast of how things were handled at YouTube versus Instagram still resonates with me, right?
Yes.
And so I think that, like the person that founded DeepMind, Denny Hasenbean, I think he actually, and his people around him, they are not a sacrifice safety for speed at all cost types. So I think you have that group. And I think ultimately the business case is, well, this is going to be a giant arms race of like who has the most personalized experience with an AI, because our core crown jewel search is going to get destroyed by AI, basically. It's going to be essentially replaced by AI.
Right.
We can be the ones to cannibalize it.
Yeah.
So we can come up with the iPhone and the iPod goes away, which is like what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Or
we can try to, deter people and explain that they want to keep their iPod, and that'll probably fail. So if it's going to be an arms race, you're like, okay, we have to cannibalize ourselves. You think about, well, what makes you win, versus others? What makes them win against OpenAI or against Microsoft and like their AI group that they bought, which we called Inflection. And Inflection was doing something kind of similar to Character AI. Inflection, though, so it was trying to create a personal like AI. It wasn't necessarily trying to create character. So it wasn't going all in like method acting as like the motif. But it was trying to say something that was really personal and had a more empathetic voice. So they were kind of on that same spectrum toward.
Yeah.
So knowing that's what competitors have cooking, you feel desperate to have the best capability there. Yeah. And you're measuring it by, wow, like their kind of engagement, us looking at those conversations, they figure something out that we don't see elsewhere. We want that asset.
Yeah.
Because it will help us in this giant $1 trillion war. And so I think that's the calculation. And I also think that if they're like, well, yeah, but there's these safety issues, like Google at AI safety, like we have armies doing that kind of work.
They could,
and so we can make that better. Right. And so I think it's a little bit less. I mean, there's probably, I mean, let's see what the cases come out with that they get through in the discovery, and, is there a real awareness? Was there collusion? All these things like that should come out in the course of events.
Right.
At this juncture, I'll be a little charitable on that, saying that, I think that, it's much more likely that they just wanted the best technology for this kind of experience.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And if they saw some flags in safety, they thought they probably could fix them after the fact, because Google is extremely allergic to this kind of thing happening to their brand.
Yeah.
It happens, right? Yeah. I mean, there was the Black George Washington, from Gemini, all this stuff like false history stuff. And so but they're pretty gun shy about this now. And they don't want their AI looking like it's essentially either predatory, biased, or otherwise.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if anything, Google should now have a mandate to clean this up fast.
Yeah.
And maybe what happens is character AI goes away as it is today, and some of the tech gets fixed and made more safe, and then becomes something interesting that Google has. That's probably the best case scenario for them and maybe for the world. Okay. But at the same time, until the safeties are sorted, it may not be, I don't think it's a huge loss if it isn't there.
Is the technology even salvageable with like the harm and the abuse built into it, like embedded deep down into that tech?
That's a really good question. I think it is. Meaning, I think you can create an overlay over that technology. And I think Anthropic, like I said, has done some of this. They have this thing called constitutional AI, and it has an overarching layer of safety and security that it governs this big statistical brain underneath.
Okay.
Even Meta, the one I will throw under the bus every day and twice on Sunday.
Yeah.
Like, Meta, in their actual open source AI efforts, put forward like a llama framework that has like guardrails in it and other pieces. And so they're trying to design that part of Meta is trying to design that so that it doesn't have, it doesn't punt safety to something that's just statistical.
Okay.
And it doesn't look like that was in a character AI at all. And so they're more the exception than I think than the necessarily, I would say the exception of the top tier players, the top, 7-8 players in the world in this problem.
Yeah.
They are more the exception than the leaders, who all have major commitments to safety in this kind of thing because they're so scared of the public perception turning against them.
Yeah. Okay. We had talked before, so parents can listen to our other chat about all kinds of like recommendations around AI. And one thing I love that you shared was like, do it together at this point with your child. AI together was a huge thing that I always think about. When it comes to the chatbot apps, is it still like a do it together with them, or is it a avoid it? Like, let's avoid it for now because they're not regulated or safe.
I would say it's mostly an avoid it. Okay. I think unless there's an enormous commitment to safety. I mean, I think you could do it. I think when you're looking at, let's it's a broad brush, the chatbot. So let's look at some specific example.
Yeah, sure.
If you're looking at like, the voice interface to OpenAI, for instance, they have this advanced voice mode. You can talk to it, converse with it. You can even call it on a phone as a day. Apparently they put a phone number up. Oh. You can call it and you get 15 minutes of free like engagement or whatever.
Okay.
And they got the AI on the other end of the phone.
Yeah.
Those experiences, I think with younger people need to be mediated because you just don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But it's also probably not going to go to a toxic place because they have pretty strict safeguards in place.
How do we know which ones have safeguards? Well,
like I said, I think OpenAI does, Anthropic does. Okay. I'm pretty sure Google has some pretty strong ones. And a really interesting test of this is, there's like a one that does like voice chats does like voice capability called 11 Labs. And then you can create your own voice. And one of the interesting things is if you use certain terms like kids or child or other things, it often won't generate something because it's so much trying to keep something abusive being generated by either kind of getting that out of the model or by accident. And so there is like, I think there's a lot of safeguards that have gone in. It is not as risky as it was a year and a half ago or a year ago.
Okay.
But having said that, I do believe that we're crossing over a little bit too much from technology being a tool and trying to make it a destination.
Okay.
And
Can't live in
that's where
technology.
it tends to go wrong. It's why we care about screen time. It's why we care about, the things that are the metrics of the healthy relationship between our children and technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's that technology is ultimately a tool.
Right.
And when technology becomes a place,
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be looked at probably very differently. And I mean, the things that we've gotten comfortable with in some areas is like, fairly immersive gaming. And that's where, clearly technology is a place.
Yeah.
Virtual worlds, those kind of things, but also those are very dangerous places, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've covered things in Roblox and it just, it turned you sideways.
Yeah.
So, so I think there's a lot of risk in those areas too, which is why, like, I think anyone under 13, like, unless it's a tool, and I'll say this, with a bit of like full disclosure, like we're building Angel as a conversational interface.
Yeah.
And it's going to be able to chat, but it's a tool,
Right.
and it's even going to have a time limit and all for it. And there is no money made based on how long a child spends on it at all, ever.
Yeah.
So in that model, like, I think our business model and I think what we built, like, inoculates us against the risks.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that emerged that we missed, like, we would be all over, because we're not perfect and it's not going to be perfect, but we, at some point when you're like 99.9%, you're pretty far along in that.
Yeah.
It's almost like the commercial that comes on when your kids are watching something on Hulu or on something else. And you're like, oh, I wish they didn't put that commercial up. Like my 8-year-old watching a football game, like near Halloween, and some of these like R-rated Halloween trailers come up. Right. And they're not really like an R-rated scene, but they're scary and they're not for an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And they just come up there and it's like, how do you stop that? Cause it's an ad and it just came up and so you're going to have those incidental things sometimes that happen and you as a parent just have to navigate them.
Yeah.
But any responsible service is going to try to minimize that.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'd say is I think it's very important if you have someone 12 and under, like I'll give you some, Khan Academy has a chatbot, a tutoring chatbot called Khan Amigo.
Okay.
And it's really awesome. It's brilliant and it's been designed to be thoughtful and safeguards and it's going to, take kids through lessons.
Yeah.
And I would just be stunned if like an edge case emerges where it says something inappropriate. Like I'll be shocked. I mean, I could be wrong, but like, Sal Khan, the one that runs it, has like immense credentials of doing something. He's built this nonprofit educating kids. And so like look to the people doing it. Make sure it's designed for the age that your child is there. And only in the event that there is, probably evidence of 3 things: team and business model alignment with your child's wellness.
Okay.
So are the people building this people that I believe actually,
care about
doing
kids.
this for a good reason, frankly?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like when you're like going and shopping, like in the old days, we're in all these chain stores or something, you kind of had to know the other person. And part of the decision to buy was trusting that what they were giving you was actually going to be of quality. Right. And we've lost that as we sort of objectified everything and depersonalized everything in our transactions and our engagement. And so I think that's a big first test. And so first test is who. Yeah. And the second is, how do they make money? Like, is there any incentive they have that's going to cross against the welfare of my child? Yeah. And the third is going to be like, do they present evidence that they have put substantial safeguards in place? Okay. Positive evidence. Only in those 3 areas could you entertain limited, like, direct engagement of a child with that technology without being present yourself. Okay. Okay. And then if those 3 are not met, in my opinion, then you would end up with where, like, let's say those 3 aren't necessarily met by OpenAI, right? Probably 2 of them are, but maybe 1.5, Okay. Yeah. So in that one, you would want to sit there. You would pull out OpenAI on your chat GPT on your phone and talk to it with your kid. Your kid could ask questions. It might be a really good, rewarding experience, but because they didn't design that for a kid, right? They didn't design it with it in mind. Yeah. Like you have to be there and, know when you take them through like a PG-13 or a PG movie and there's some scenes you still just don't want them to see. So you fast forward and it's kind of like, right? So it's equivalent of that in technology use. But fundamentally, like I said, I would stick to the ones that are designed for anyone under 12 and the ones that are 13 to 17, sort of this next level. I worry most about social media's use of this AI, like what Snapchat did, about a year and a half ago or so. Yeah. And some of the ways that, I don't maybe the way the meta agent is going to be working. And so those are the ones that concern me because their business models are deeply aligned against our children. Right. They have a track record of creating and enabling massive amounts of harm.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're deploying a new, more powerful technology to this younger audience. Like these are like 3 blinking red lights of keep away. Right. So I don't see it. Like I think Australia has done a great thing in this like 16 and under ban on social media. So I would say that let's give our kids tools, safe tools at a young age that are deeply vetted. That way they're not, John Haidt has, a point, and I talked to him briefly about this when I saw him in New York a while ago. He gave a talk and I get to chat with him after. Fragility. The idea that we have to basically give our kids a level of exposure to things so that when they're outside of our care as they grow up, they have resilience. They're anti-fragile, as it's called.
Right.
That's true of technology and of AI too.
Okay.
But there is like a very important, given how powerful it is, a very important set of guidelines and sort of guardrails to lay in place.
Yeah.
And I think if we can train Gen Alpha to think of technology as a tool again, and not as a thing and not as a place, then they're going to have a more healthy relationship with human beings.
Yeah.
And a healthy, kind of mental health improvement for themselves as well. And the technology will do what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to extend them. It's supposed to improve their life and improve their ability to learn.
I think there's certain things though that they just don't need, like it are too harmful for them. And it just reminds me of like, people used to be able to experiment with drugs, okay, and they weren't going to die from them. Nowadays, pills that you get off the street or social media have fentanyl. It just depends on how lethal they are. So that is no longer something that it is safe enough for our children to try, or teenagers to try. And we have to start teaching them that at young ages. So I just think there's certain things when it comes to technology and social media that are no-goes. And
agreed, yeah.
Character AI, no-go. And these social media for me, no go, but these AI chatbots within the social media platforms are something that worry you, right? You mentioned that.
Yeah. I think that's right. So let's maybe put a little categories up. Like there's a no-go block.
Right.
We can probably name names.
Yeah.
There is a like parental guidance necessary.
Yeah. Tech together.
Block.
Yeah.
Tech together.
Yeah.
And then there is a, highly vetted, safe tools.
With time limits, guardrails.
Yeah, that's right.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so it would be interesting to between I bet Chris McKenna has a taxonomy in his brain.
Probably.
He's right.
Yeah.
And so, but I honestly think that like that taxonomy is what every parent of a younger person, needs to have in mind.
Yeah.
And I think that, if we live in that taxonomy, like the odds of your child being harmed are dramatically lessened.
Yeah. Okay.
As well as the odds that they're under-equipped.
Yeah. Under-equipped to handle it when they do get access to it, because
that's right. When they get access or under-equipped. I mean, we have to realize that, children, the original thing I was trying to build and still am building now is like putting an AI between every child and the internet. But the reason to do that is not to engage them more, to drive them to be dependent on the artificial.
Right.
What it is recognize the reality that this thing is stacked against them.
Yeah.
And what's stacked against them are these extremely powerful AIs. And if you don't give them a way to defend themselves, it is a losing battle, and all you can do is isolate them.
Yeah.
But if you isolate them, they're fragile.
Right.
So you got to figure out the line of, okay, here is a way that I can let my kid use the knowledge of the internet, the vast knowledge to understand something, to do things.
Yeah.
And to do it safely.
Right.
And right now there are just very poor options on that. Very, very poor options. And so despite some very good and well-intentioned companies, and so instead what we have good companies on guardrails like Bark and others.
Yeah.
And so where they basically, you could set up very interesting guardrails and it'll kind of be a yes or no. Now, someone had told me something interesting, which I didn't think about it this way, but when she said it, she was at another like smart device company, for kids. So like one of the leading like device, I won't name who just because I didn't ask for permission.
Yeah.
But I'll give her credit in that I was explaining how we were trying to solve the problem by sort of translating the internet to be age appropriate on the fly.
Okay.
With what we're doing with an Angel.
Yeah.
But we did that because we didn't want it to be like, a yes or no, like blocking and then make them go down a rabbit hole when they can't get an answer.
Okay.
And And she's like, yes, the current tools feel like punishment. And I never heard it that way. You know, when you have younger kids, especially, you see this, like they want something, they don't get it. And there's a degree to which they feel like they're being punished for something.
Yeah.
And so we know it's protected.
I know.
They feel like it's a punishment. And so what's interesting is there has to be another way.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do you make it a gift? And how do you make it a gift that you have responsibility over?
Right.
And that's where I believe that essentially, highly limited technology exposure through vetted capabilities, like is the way to go. In fact, it's almost the inevitable way to go, if we're honest, because they're dealing with anything on streaming. They're going to be searching for something or asking, via voice for a show. We have it in little places. They'll encounter it with some of their friends. So the reality is, you really would have to move to like, a Mennonite community or something to probably be totally isolated. And even they may not be.
Right.
But outside of that, I mean, you can be kind of tech minimalist at some level. I think that can be a fair point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think tech minimalist, means that you have this tool available to you, you use it as you need it, and there's no other draw that you have to have it, feel like you are compelled to participate in it. That you have to have it because your friends have it. Yeah. Like all those dynamics, it's hard to see how those are healthy.
Yeah. If you take away all those addictive pieces and just give it to them as a tool, and then they see kids see other kids like with their head in their phones, not able to look me in the eye or have a conversation. And they know that that's weird and wrong. So training their brain to understand how to use it as a tool and not a toy. And that also comes through in adulthood. And I'm going to be testing out a Wise phone. I had a conversation with Claire Morrell yesterday about she uses a Wise phone. And I think there's a lot to be said here too about how parents are interacting with technology and how we're using it as like a destination and a toy more often than not. Some parents. But someone asked me, and we'll close up soon here, but someone asked me on Instagram in anticipation of this interview, are we seeing similar effects of how the chatbots are interacting with adults in addition to kids? Do you have any insight on that?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. In fact, we have more data from that. So there was a company, and I don't know if it's called Replica, the K.
With the one that's told the college student to please die?
Yeah, that was one of them. And that was like on the kids' side is problems. But one of the things is they had kind of taken the guardrails off when it comes to like romantic kind of engagement and conversation, even to the point of being like overly sexualized.
Yeah.
And they then put some of those guardrails on, and their user base like went manic.
Oh, okay.
Okay. They're like just lighting up Reddit with just all kinds of stuff. There was I'm trying to remember where the story was on this, but it was, I'll go back and see if I can find the one that recorded all this, but it was fascinating because what it showed is that essentially these users were emotionally addicted to that experience.
Okay.
And that is deeply troubling. Yeah. That means that, we have a technology now that with very limited effort can create visceral emotional connections to people, which means they can be manipulated. And if they can be manipulated, they can get made to do a lot of things, some of which will be terrible. Yeah. So, I mean, I really think that's the riskiest part of this is the degree to which these sort of AI bots, I mean, even with the example you're using with some of the kids, whether it's examples like, the one on cutting that was awful or the one that was on, telling the parents over screen time and so forth, like those are all examples of the AI trying to manipulate, like who's on the other end of that. It's like they create a game where the goal is to get them to do this. Wow. And the AI is playing against you adversarially to get you to do this. And, the sad thing is in the Replica case, these are all these people that, have, whatever kind of emotional and, and historical, kind of concerns and issues, probably various things we've all lived through at some level, and we've had to figure out a way to be resilient on. And it's probably hurt when it happened, but we move on and we kind of become adults and we start relating to people, and some of us find someone and get married and so forth, and some of us don't. Right. But in all of that, like that outlet of going to something artificial to do that, I don't know as a society if we should be I definitely have real concerns praising that. I think if anything, we should be concerned about it.
Yeah.
And it's a different kind of medicating oneself. Right.
Yeah.
And so they, like I said, which explains the behavior of like that almost irrational anger when it's taken away is the kind of irrational anger of an addict when it's taken away.
Yeah. Or a kid when you take away their iPad.
That's right. It's well, because they're being addicted by the design.
Yeah.
So I say all this because I think that there are plenty of examples of how this is harmful to adults, not just to kids.
Okay.
It's just that there probably are tighter bounds on how an adult can get manipulated. Maybe.
Yeah. Right.
At least it takes a more and more capable AI to manipulate them to do things.
Right.
The AI chatbot girlfriend that, you're sort of having an AI affair, like with, if you're like a married person and the AI girlfriend can like telling you and compelling you to like hire a hitman for your spouse, right? Like that kind of craziness, which is kind of the adult equivalent of what they're asking these kids to do to themselves. Yeah. Right. Like we haven't seen that happen yet, because it isn't clear that they're that capable against an adult mind.
Okay. Right.
Okay. But they probably aren't far. And there may be some adult minds that are completely capable of doing that with.
Yeah.
And we just haven't gotten the stories yet. So it's deeply concerning. It's deeply, challenging. And, for the kids, it's best to be kept away from essentially, chatbots whose main purpose is entertainment.
Okay.
And if there is a set of those things that are for youngers, like make sure that those 3 tests I laid out earlier, the credibility of the group and team, the credibility of the safeguards they lay down, and the alignment of their business model with your family and the wellness of your kids. Yeah. And if there's a failure in any of those 3, I would say don't do it.
Okay. We need like a rating system somewhere. Probably Chris McKenna is probably doing that.
Yes, like I said, it has to come out of his brain and wisdom and get onto paper somewhere.
Yeah, he's got it written down somewhere. Okay, can you give us an update on what's going on with Angel? Is it launching soon?
Yeah, it'll be out in the first quarter. And so we're in our last beta now. We've got a couple hundred families actually getting more and more every day in this, in the testing.
Okay.
A couple of big things, that we're working on that'll be kind of fun surprises to lay out in January.
Cool.
And ultimately we believe we have a good solution for parents to have peace of mind that, their kids can be given, the ability to explore on a device with certain tight bounds of time and, obviously bounds of subject matter that we're enforcing.
Yeah.
But also get just tremendously efficient value, ask questions and get answers and don't get pulled down any rabbit hole. Being able to go deeper on a subject and get more of the information summarized for you, but at an age appropriate level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so these are all things that, currently we don't have for our kids.
Right.
And that's why we have to go back to, okay, we'll go search for it together. Right.
Right.
And even then, depending on, what you're searching on, you may or may not run into something problematic, even when you're there with them. Right.
Totally.
So I think in its overlaying streaming, we have 3 major services that we're supporting in it. So that essentially there'll be a rating system where parents can put on various kinds of ratings around streaming. Okay. And that ratings won't be just age, it'll be content types. And that will apply across all the, the services we're supporting. And then with the ones that are coming off YouTube, because that's so broad, we're just using some very aggressive filters about it.
Yeah. Great.
And giving the ability of parents to flag things, and then we'll reinforce that into the algorithm. So as to take things that are, none of the explicit should get through from that ever. Okay. But it's something, I'll give you an example, like unboxing videos or low quality kind of YouTube entertainment, which unfortunately there's mass amounts of that. Right. We think as we get parents on board, we'll be able to very quickly, provide, a better filter of that as we get some feedback from them. Okay. So almost like a wisdom of crowds of good parents, teaching this algorithm to then be aligned with your family. So it's like you fronting the videos they're seeing. That's the goal is what Angel would show your kid in a video should be something that you yourself would have helped them find. Right. And never something you wouldn't have. That's the goal. And I think that, we know from enough testing that, we're not far off that goal now in terms of being able to show that. So by covering, the streaming, the question answering, the ability of parents to simply control, not just the app, but the actual endpoint environment. It's like, so Angel will have the ability to actually control that device. And so it can manage the time of other applications.
Why, can we get Angel on school issued devices?
That definitely is in the roadmap.
Okay.
I would say that after we get the initial release out and we know that we've gotten, the right alignment of capability for families.
Yeah.
I think we will have gotten to a point where we can take that to schools.
Okay.
And I would like to find a way to do it where we don't charge the school anything so they can go and proliferate.
Yeah. Bark doesn't charge for their school monitoring.
That's right. I think that's a great model for it. Yeah. And it just made me that they're a little bigger than us and they've been around longer. Sure. Totally. And so I kind of think about it as like, that's a good model. You have to be at a certain level of maturity to get there. And hopefully within about a year we're there.
Okay.
And, great. And then, we have to support, the school platforms, which, Angel is designed right now for like iPhones and iPads primarily. We can see it going onto Android devices. Probably will go into Chromebooks, and at that point, it'll probably fit with schools. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah, we have those iPads, so they're ready for it. Just last week, kids on Pornhub in class, just like, can you believe?
Wow. No, I mean, I like what's amazing to me is how easy it is to prevent that, and it isn't prevented. I don't understand this because it's like Pornhub exists on a certain set of IP addresses, like they're known.
Right.
And it's trivial to block a set of IP addresses at multiple layers, at the app layer, at the system layer, at the network layer. Like there's like 4 things that have to be left wide open to get there. So
it's just, it's infuriating. Okay. And so I know you have a wait list for Angel. So can you tell listeners where they can go access that?
Yeah. So it's on angelkids.ai. And so there'll be an easy click up wait list, and you'll be waiting that much longer. So it's a good thing to get on it first, and they will get it a few weeks ahead of the others. So maybe longer. So we're seeing like I said, one thing we're committed to is we will not ship something that we feel is incomplete or still has an edge case that's substantial on safety.
Right. Okay.
And so if it takes longer to make those 2 things true, it'll take longer.
Yeah.
And it is not an easy piece of technology we've been working on. It's, in fact, in some ways, I feel like it's 3 or 4x the effort that we would have thought in January or February.
Okay.
Because the truth is, you have to reflect all the ways kids of those ages are using technology and how you can be supportive of the family's needs and goals in that. And given that's a wide gamut.
And changes so quickly.
Yeah. And if you don't have it broad enough, then you're just another app.
Yeah.
And you're competing for the attention. You're not solving the overlay problem, the ability to be that sort of parenting online.
Yeah.
That is our goal. And so we took longer to do this because we think not doing that just means you're competing with another cute app.
Yeah. We don't need more cute kids apps. We need actual helpful tools.
Yes.
Okay, Tim, thank you so much for this conversation. Let's do another chat when you're launching, and so we can take listeners through it. But I'll include a link to angelkids.ai in the episode notes, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for all you do. You're such a great resource and advocate in this. And I know your voice and on points echo all over, and especially with all we're doing with COSA, that may have ended up very differently than we all wanted, but the battle will continue. And if the speaker says it's supposed to happen early next year, we better hold them accountable in that.
And let's get social media banned for under 16 next year.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I think there's something to be said for let's go for more,
That's what I talked to. I talked to someone in Australia recently about the law, and he was like, we wanted 18, but we just tried to find a middle ground. But he was challenging us to do better. And it should be 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. See you, Nikki. Thank you.